Good afternoon. Um, my name is Natalia Fedorova. I'm happy to greet everyone in Seoul and everywhere else in the world where you are participating in Teleported Arts 2022. So I'm really grateful to the organizers for the opportunity to talk. So I'm today at the Botanical Garden of St. Petersburg State University. So everywhere else outside of this place, everything is covered with snow. But here I'm surrounded by the plants from all over the world, and these plants have been here for more than 100 years. You see the palm in my background, and this palm is older than 100 years. It survived the Second World War. So I chose this unique space to talk about my work, about this little poetry generator, which is called to be the wind for the tree. It takes pauses of 10 seconds between the generations. So this work is translation of physiological parameters of the tree, and this tree is the 300-year-old oak tree from the summer garden. This is something which we can think of as a diary of the tree and the diary of the summer 2020. So the measurements were taken from the 1st of June and until the 9th of November. The work goes back to a significant history, to a significant time. Here it was the second lockdown, the moment when people were not able to continue living the way they used to live before. The theaters, the cinemas, the museums, the restaurant, the little hotels, everything that people got used to doing in the summer is closed. And this function of shifting the perspective, this function of shifting from one's thoughts and experiences was given to the outer space, to the city parks, to the forests, to the country houses. So for many people, that was the time of rediscovering and rethinking of the nature, and just the fact that at this moment, the fact of communicating with any human is a potential act of transmitting the disease, and in this case, the plants would be presenting this safe environment. So I started working on this text generator in 2020, and I got interested in dendrology and trees at the same time. This interest not only originated from the pandemic situation, but also came from working on a project for Ars Electronica in St. Petersburg, which was called Garnier. That we prepared this project together with three of my colleagues, Artur Konstantinov, Laura Rodriguez, and Anna Kozlova. And within this project, we were rethinking the idea of the garden, and we came up with 4 types of gardens. One of them being the greenhouses, just like this botanic garden that I'm in now. So the Russian word for this would be parniki. And we were thinking of artists being in these greenhouses all by themselves and continuing to grow their art activity from within, from their little, or not necessarily little, apartments. The other garden that we were thinking of was the idea of the abandoned garden, and again we were filming the abandoned gardens here. So abandoned gardens would be the institutions that are empty of the people, and there is some other life that is probably happening there, so we wanted to think what kind of life could that be. And within these abandoned gardens, I wrote the proposal of to be the wind for the tree, of this kind of poetic tree that is composing little poems just by growing, just by moving in the wind, and just by experiencing and sometimes buffering the atmospheric events and the anthropogenic effects. The third type of garden was the wandering garden, and it was actually a boat. And we were thinking of St. Petersburg as the city that is built on water and that is built on mesh. And thus, probably the most considerable, the most visible, the most influential garden would be somewhere in the water, on the water, or under the water. And certainly the fourth type of garden would have to involve something digital. And we were thinking of something that we formulated as post-non-human gardens, being this meta spaces that people exist in. So I was in the summer 2020, in July 2020, when there was nowhere else to go but to a garden, that I went to the Forest Academy garden, one of the gardens that we were working with within the Garnier project. And I saw a little device called Tritoka attached to one of the trees in the Forest Academy. So then I met the people from the Smart Urban Nature, and I thought that the most natural thing to do with a device that is called Tritoka is to create a poem, this 633 line poem that is a diary of the tree from 2020. So the Tritoka sensor works with 7 physiological parameters of the tree. We've already talked about the Garnier sensor that measures the flow of the sap. We've already talked about the accelerometer that measures the position of the tree in space. We've talked about the spectrometer that measures the quality of the crown. There are also sensors that measure the temperature and the humidity of the trunk, and the temperature and the humidity outside. So usually the Tritoka sensor is used to measure something which is called the ecosystem services of the trees. So the idea of the ecosystem services has to do with the way the negative human effect, human and non-human effect, can be blocked and absorbed by the trees. So what are the ecosystem services that the trees usually provide? So we can think of something which is most obvious. They help to fight the heat island, the excessive hot temperatures that we experience in the cities, especially once the sun is reflected by the asphalt. So it is important to measure the temperature outside of the tree crown and inside the tree crown, because this difference allows us to see how the tree deals with the heat island and how it actually creates small cooler spaces. And in the text generator there's a line cooler than the air in my cool crown, and lines like this. So I would use these lines once the temperature outside would be higher than the temperature inside of the crown. And usually this happens on a very, very sunny day. And vice versa, the temperature of the tree is usually warmer than the outside temperature. So in November, the temperature of the trunk would be warmer than the outside, and the line that I used to talk about it would be warmer than the air. And also, not all the days in summer are necessarily very warm. In St. Petersburg, the medium temperature would be +15, so oftentimes when the temperature outside is +15, +14, and maybe a little bit lower, the tree trunk would be 17 or 18 degrees, and then I would also use the line warmer than the air. So the regulating of temperature is one of the ecosystem services that the trees provide. The other ecosystem service has also to do with the name of the work. The other ecosystem service is blocking the very strong wind. This function is stronger when the leaves are present, and a little bit less strong when the leaves have fallen. So again, I'm using in the text generator filtering the wind, and also raindrops in my leaves to talk about the various atmospheric events that the trees are filtering and blocking. And here, with these factors, we move to the measurements of spectrometer. So the spectrometer tells us about the quality and the density of the crown, and the dense crown can block the rain, reduce the heat effect. But what it also does, I use this in text generator to absorb the dust. It allows the measured particles, the particles that appear in the atmosphere when the garbage is burned, or the particles that appear in the atmosphere because of the movement of the cars. So something which we call dust. It stays on the leaves of the trees, and thus it doesn't continue circulating in the air, and we know that the measured particles would be one of the causes of cancer. So the heat effect, the various particles and other atmospheric events, but also trees help to stabilize the soil and to take out the excess moisture from the soil. And this working with the excess moisture is one of the parameters that the sap flow is showing. So once the sap flow is very, very high, It may mean many things. It may mean that the tree is healthy. It may mean that the temperature outside is too hot and leaves need a little bit more water. But also, it may mean that there is too much water in the soil. So after the rain, usually we could see that the sap flow is very, very high. There could be more than 30 liters that the tree is circulating, 30 liters of sap that the tree that circulate within the tree. So that oftentimes happens after several rainy days, or it also can happen after several very, very hot days. But within this diary, I observed that the numbers were very high in September and October. And I would use the line draining of the soil when there are more than 30 liters. More than 30 liters circulate within the tree. In my case, working with the generator wasn't so much about thinking of what ecosystem services the tree is providing and how this can be calculated in economic terms and how much it costs. But for me, it was more important to understand the being that I spend most of the time with in 2020, and to see. So usually when we think of the other, we think of walking in someone else's shoes. And in this case, it was an exercise, and hence the name to be the wind for the tree. It is some kind of a semiotic machine that allows one to train the ability to see the world from a different perspective. So it is not the usual cognitive operation of imagining oneself in a different situation, but it is imagining another being in the same situation and learning to understand what are the factors, what are the parameters, what are the aspects, what are the things that affect and influence this other being, what is important for it and what is not important. Are there any crossing points that we can possibly find between the sensuality of the tree? Yes, we also sense the rain, we also sense the wind, we also suffer from the excessive heat or the excessive cold. But it is interesting to think, well, just to think and remember that that the plants also feel, they also experience the atmospheric events, and it is interesting to understand how exactly, what exactly, for example, the wind means for this other entity as opposed to what the wind means to us, the human beings. So you can see that slowly 4 lines are appearing on the screen, and these 4 lines are 4 physiological parameters. The first line corresponds to the radial growth. The second one corresponds to the stability of the tree, its position in the 3D axis. The fourth line has to do with the condition of the crown and how it reacts to the atmospheric events. And the fourth line is based on the Garnier sensor, on the speed and the number of liters that the tree is circulating, number of liters of sap that the tree is circulating within it. So I'd probably read one or two lines. Round and round, stable, very stable, warmer than air, hide the rain in leaves. It takes the pauses, and I kind of like how it takes the pauses. It is quite a repetitive poem. I'll read one more. Round and round, stable, very stable, to absorb the dust, slow, sleepy sap. And one more. Round and round. Stable, very stable, hides rain in leaves, water from the earth. Round and round. Stable, very stable. In my cool shade, water to the leaves. So what you hear is that the lines are very repetitive. And here I was also reading at a different speed because the data is taken from the table, so we have 3 speeds here. My speed as a human being, the speed of the internet that I'm sharing with this device so that the text can appear on the screen, and the speed of the tree. So the fact that it is very repetitive, it teaches us to look at the nature, because there are not too many spectacular events happening within the leaves of the tree or within the trunk. There are tiny little things, tiny little hints that are changing that you need to learn to perceive through repetition, through observing, through seeing the same image, the same picture again and again. I kind of like that the screen has only four lines, and this brings the illusion, this brings the thinking of the 4 seasons, and the fact that there is this rhythm of seasons, this rhythm of slow growing that we share with all the beings on Earth. Thank you very much, and I would be happy to answer your questions.